We're going to get started. First of all, thank you so much for being here. This is the 15th or so conference I've spoken at, but still every single time I panic that nobody will show up to my session. And then I think, actually, that wouldn't be so bad. Then I could just go hear one of the other 5 sessions that I really want to be listening to right now. But thank you for assuaging that fear for me. And I really appreciate your being here because at a multi-track conference like this, this is now my second NDC conference, every hour there's a ton of sessions that I want to go to. The quality is so high. So I really appreciate you choosing to spend some time with me, especially with all the cool tech talks. If you're just here because you're completely exhausted from all the tech talks and you need to sit in the back and sleep, that's okay, I get it. But I'm glad you're here. So before I get started, a little bit about me. I'm Erika. I am Erika Carlson everywhere on the internet that matters. I'm a software developer. I started in back-end Java years ago, did some JavaScript, did some other stuff, primarily do iOS development these days. I work at a little company called Detroit Labs in Detroit, Michigan, and I train and coach software developers. My current role is the director of our apprenticeship and training programs. A couple of years ago, we were really struggling to hire mobile developers because, as it turns out, mobile developers can get paid a lot of money. And they can get paid a lot of money to go work in places where it's not winter for 9 months out of the year. So we thought, okay, what can we do? And our company has a really strong teaching and learning culture. I'm going to get more into this later in the talk. But we thought, what if we could take that culture and apply it to people who didn't have any prior experience in software development? So we started our apprenticeship program, and we brought in 10 people who had no prior experience as software developers. And over the course of 3 months, we trained them, they learned iOS, and at the end of those 3 months, we hired them and they joined our team full-time. Many of them are still with us. We did the same thing in the fall with an Android program. The next year, one of our clients came to us and said, you just trained yourself 20 developers. That's phenomenal. Could you do that for us? So we did a JavaScript program for a major automotive client in Detroit. We just did another iOS program for another major automotive client in Detroit. So at this point, we've graduated close to 50 people from our program. We're really proud of it, and I am really proud that I get to run it. So coaching and training are a big part of what I do every day. I also coach a lot of our regular employees who are interested in growing, who want to build their careers. And I kind of fell into that because my career took a really interesting trajectory. If you'd asked me 5 years ago when I was happily banging away at Java, if my job was going to be train junior developers 5 years down the road, I would have been like, no. A, I don't know enough, and B, I hate talking in front of people, so this seems like a bad combination for me. I learned a lot along the way. And one last thing, which is kind of where this talk comes from. Before I got into development, my background was psychology. I did mediation, which means I helped people get divorced, which is about as much fun as it sounds. But I learned a lot. I learned a lot about what motivates people, what brings them joy, what makes them struggle, and how they grow. And so that background informs a lot of the work I do now and informs a lot of what you're going to hear in this talk. Speaking of this talk, I'm going to talk to you today about how to grow as a software developer. And I mean that technically and interpersonally and professionally. This talk involves 10 strategies that are drawn from my career and from my experience coaching others. I like to think that it's relevant no matter what stage of your career that you're in, because it's never too late to grow. And hopefully, throughout our entire careers, we're finding new challenges for ourselves, exploring new opportunities, and pushing ourselves. Really quick, I'd like to know who's in the room with me. Raise your hand if you would consider yourself to be a junior developer. Got a couple, nice, okay. Mid-level. Okay, and raise your hand if you're a senior, tech lead, any of that good stuff. Awesome, okay, a good mix this time. So lots of mid-levels, lots of seniors, a couple of juniors. Great. As a developer, you know that growth and change is part of who we are, right? We don't really have an option. The work that we do changes daily, weekly, monthly. I was an iOS developer before there was Swift, and then suddenly there was a new programming language, and we all kind of went, and really quickly, while also maintaining all of our Objective-C apps, picked up this whole new language. But that's just part of the job. It's part of the deal. It's really exciting because we don't have to do the same thing day after day, year after year. We get to go do new, cool things and explore them, but it means that growth is part of our job. If we stagnate, we die. All right, so we're going to start talking through our career progression a little bit with what it looks like. Step 1, junior developer. You made it. You got a job. Yay you, congratulations. So you learn to code, and you learn to problem solve, and you learn to use code to problem solve, and you learn to deal with other people, kind of. And every day you hopefully get better at all of those things. And your primary job is to learn. The middle is where it gets weird. Because one day you wake up and you're not a junior developer anymore. Maybe this is because somebody says to you that you're not a junior developer anymore, but more likely it's because you look around one day and realize you kind of have some idea what's going on, and people are now coming to you and saying, hey, can you help me with this? Can you explain this to me? And you go, I know things they don't. It's magical. But you're definitely not a senior dev yet. That's still like, way off in the future. And this is right around the point where the career path gets really confusing for most people. One of the biggest questions that I get from people that I coach is, how do I know when I'm a senior developer? I used to say when I gave conference talks that I would give people $20 if they could give me a good answer, and then I got enough good answers that I stopped making that offer. So sorry, no dice today. But that is one of the biggest questions. How do I get here? I joke now that you're a senior developer when your job title is senior developer and or your salary has an acceptable number of zeros in it. I work for a flat organization, so there are no job titles. But I've discovered an interesting phenomenon, whereas people will start calling you a senior dev at a certain point, even though it's not really the thing that we have. We don't have juniors or mid-levels or seniors. We just have developers, but people will still say, oh yeah, so-and-so, our senior iOS dev. So everybody else knows when you're a senior developer. You just got to figure it out. Career paths are weird in software because they're different. They're different depending on if you're a startup, on if you're at a flat organization like mine, which has 100 people and no managers, that's an adventure, or if you're in a traditional hierarchy. I'm from Detroit. A lot of the big automakers are there. They've got like 12 levels that are just technical, and then there's like 18 managerial levels above that. I wish I were kidding, but I'm not. So it varies. There's not really a clear, you start here, you end up in the middle here, and then here's your goal. 5 years ago, somebody said to me, what do you want to be doing in 5 years? I hate that question, mostly because I don't usually know the answer to it. But also because for a developer, it's a limiting question. Because the work we do is so flexible and applies to so many things and is constantly changing. So in 5 years, we could realistically be doing anything. I'm not doing now what I thought I would be doing 5 years ago. I'd be willing to bet that some of you aren't either. So with this talk, I wanted to introduce a different way to think about growing your career. Although, that doesn't look like a bad goal to me. So strategy number 1 is to begin with the end. When I talk to people about careers, and when I begrudgingly sit down and think about my own, I focus on 2 questions. Where am I going? And how am I getting there? And where generally is not, in 5 years I want to be CTO, or in 5 years I want to be an architect, or in 5 years I want to be specific role. Where is a little more general? And I break it down like this. I start with what I want my career to support, because your career supports your life. And what you want your life to look like is the important part. Way more important than the job that you end up doing. So, do I want my career to support a family? Do I want it to support international travel? Do I want to be able to live wherever I want? Do I want to be able to live in a big city? Do I want to buy a house? Do I never want to buy a house? I have a house now, and I regret that a little bit. But think about that. What are the things that you want from life that your career has to support, that you have to make enough money to do, that you have to have enough time to do, and that you have to have the flexibility and the freedom to do? So that's question 1. Everything else lives in that context. Question 2, what are my tangible and intangible career goals? Tangible goals are things like, I want to make 6 figures. I want to manage at least 10 people. I want to be able to work remotely. I want to be able to take 6 weeks sabbatical every year. Those are tangible goals. Intangibles are things like, I want my colleagues to respect me. I want to be the person on the team that people come to when they have a question about this technology. I want fulfillment. I want recognition. And those are different for everybody. Next, what's in my way? What are the obstacles? It is amazing how often the answer to this question is yourself. Amazing. But write those down. My job is not going to get me where I want to go, but I can't quit it because X. We'll talk about that. I really, really, really want recognition in my field, but I'm really scared to talk in front of people. Talk about that too. What's in the way? And then last, great, we have all these wonderful goals. We have these things that we want our career to support. We've sketched out this whole vision. Now, what are you doing to get there? For me, sometimes when I ask these questions, I get to that last question and I go, oh, nothing. Because right this second, I'm not. I'm doing a whole bunch of stuff, but none of it is the stuff that's going to get me towards those things. So that question helps me evaluate where I'm at in context of where I want to go. Strategy number 2. Learning is who we are. It's what we do. Developers have to be exceptionally skilled learners, and it turns out that learning is a skill in and of itself. I discovered this when I started teaching for most of my job. I looked at our apprentices who succeeded and our apprentices who did not. And the biggest difference was that the ones who succeeded knew how to learn. But if learning's a skill, you can teach it. Great news for all of us. And these are some of what I consider to be the most important components of effective learning. The big one is asking good questions. This is the first thing that I try to teach new developers, how to ask a question. Because forming a good question helps you understand the problem. Sometimes if you ask a thorough enough question, you actually will hear the solution to the question in the question in your solution to the problem in your question. Identify appropriate resources. What that actually means is we need to be world-class Googlers. Really. One of my favorite tech interview questions is, if you don't know how to do this thing, what would you Google? And I can tell a lot about how effective somebody's going to be and how they can hit the ground running by their answer. Recognize and apply general principles. Most of us are past the points in our careers where we can just copy and paste an answer out of Stack Overflow and have it work for our needs. We need to be able to look at a solution or look at a best practice or look at a suggestion and go, okay, here's the concept being explained here, and here's how I apply it to my specific weird use case. And we need to be able to filter out noise. Turns out there are some bad answers on Stack Overflow. You know who does not know that? Brand new developers. I get some code and I go, where did you? And they're like, but it was on the internet. No. So we have to be able to filter out noise. There are bad tutorials, there's bad information, there are bad articles out there. You've got to be able to look at a resource because there are so many and know in about 10 to 15 seconds max if that resource is going to be useful to you or not. Being a good learner applies tech skills for sure. We have to have it for technical skills. But it's also really valuable as an interpersonal skill and as a business skill. Clients love when they can say things one time and they never have to repeat it because you got it the first time, or because you then asked the appropriate clarifying questions to get it the second time. It's a really good interpersonal skill because let's say you've got a teammate who really hates to be interrupted. And you learn that when they have their headphones on, that's the sign. Don't go near them. And if they have their headphones off, that's probably a good time to go ask them for something. You can learn about people, and it makes you more effective working with them. It's good to know your learning style. As you may have noticed, based on the amount of verbiage on my slides, I am a very verbal person. I'm also a verbal learner. So I read things, and that's how I learn them. It turns out, as a verbal learner, I'm also a verbal teacher. And that worked great until my second class of apprentices, when I had a student who raised her hand and went, "Yeah, can you draw me a picture?" First of all, I lack the design skills God gave a squirrel, so that was, a bad sign to start with. And second of all, that's just not how I think. I don't think in pictures. And I know that, which is good for me, because I know to not really go looking for visual tutorials. I have a really hard time watching videos about how to do a programming concept. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But if I can read about it and then go do it, that works. But you've got to know your learning style. We're really lucky in our field that we have so many venues for learning available to us. You're in one right now. So if you're here, you're already off to a good start. I think of opportunities for learning as kind of broken down into 3 different groups, or 3 different types. And the first one is group. Conferences are my favorite thing. I leave them so inspired. I have so many new ideas, and I'm so refreshed and ready to go back to work, and that's awesome. I also need to take about 2 days to work remotely when I get back because I'm totally peopled out by the time I get home. And that's okay. I know that about myself, so it works. But to me, it's worth it. The amount of inspiration, the amount of learning packed into a short time is invaluable. Classes. Some people learn really well when they have an instructor to ask questions. I am not one of those people, but I know a lot of them. Workshops, same deal. Meetups and user groups. I have gotten every job that I have gotten through people that I met at meetups and user groups. And this is a challenge for me because I'm deeply introverted. And I hate nothing more, literally, than going into a room full of strangers and going, "Hi, I'm Erika, I do this, how are you?" 14 times in a row. It's the worst. But it's an incredibly valuable way to meet people and build your network, and an incredibly valuable way to learn. Next, there is what I think of as solo learning. And this is learning that's focused just on you, but there's one other person involved. And mentoring and coaching fall under this category. I'm going to talk more about coaching and mentoring a little bit later. And last up is self-teaching. I was homeschooled, so I'm a big fan of self-teaching. That's kind of how I learned to learn growing up. So self-teaching involves books, tutorials, and doing your own projects to apply a concept that you're figuring out. If you look at these, some of them probably sound like better ideas to you than others. And that's fine. That's individual, person to person. But I would encourage you, if there's a form of learning that you really like, try something else once in a while. Jump out of the bubble. I was really horrified to go to my first conference. And I went, and I didn't speak to anybody, and I sat in the back row in every single session, and I went home to bed for 3 days afterward. But once I kind of recovered from the people, I went, that was awesome. I learned so much. That was so cool. So, worth exploring. One other thing to think about when you go into a learning opportunity is be open to what secondary learning opportunities there are for you. From a conference, you might learn how to talk to strangers in a professional context. From a workshop, maybe you build your skills in asking structured questions. From one-on-one mentoring, maybe you get better at receiving constructive feedback calmly and thoughtfully. That's a valuable skill. All right, strategy number 3, learn to teach. I think of knowledge as having kind of 3 levels of depth. And the first is understanding. I theoretically know that test-driven development means I write a test and then I write code to make that failing test pass. Level 2, application. I can actually set up the test framework, write the test, have a failing test, write the code, make the test pass. And then there's teaching. I can explain to somebody else so that they hit understanding and that then they get to applying. And if I'm a really good teacher, maybe they also get to teaching eventually too. Let me tell you, there is nothing in the world to make you learn a concept like realizing you're going to have to explain it to a room full of people who are going to stare at you and then ask you a lot of questions that you don't know how to answer. Seriously. Before I was a teacher of developers, I would say things like, "Hey, Don't use too much RAM with your iOS apps. Just like keep them like not memory intensive. Small memory footprint. Thumbs up. Good? Okay, move on. And the first time I did that, somebody raised their hand and went, well, how much memory can I use? And I said, as little as possible. And they said, yeah, but how much? And I went, oh. And so I had to say, I don't know, in front of a class, which is a humbling but valuable experience. But I learned from that. I went home, and the next iOS class that I taught, I spun up an app that just ate memory, and I ran it on like 4 different test devices to see when they would say memory warning, and then when they would just straight up crash. And so the next class, I went in and I said, if you use 56% of the RAM on an iPhone 6, you will get a warning, and at 60% it'll crash. Everybody went, oh, okay. And I went. So teaching takes your knowledge to a level that you might not need to go otherwise. I had to narrow down my components of effective teaching to 3. So I picked the 3 that were the biggest revelations for me. And the first one was seeking feedback and adjusting in real time. I thought of teaching as I prepare a lesson plan, I deliver the lesson plan, and then everybody goes home, which was cute. The first time I delivered a lesson plan on pass by reference versus pass by value in Java, somebody raised her hand and went, can you explain it to me with otters? I did, by the way. It took a minute, but I figured out a metaphor. Teaching never goes according to plan. You have to adjust in the moment. You have to look around and see, are you losing people? Are they falling asleep? Do they look bored? Are their eyes glazed over? Are they distracted? Are they on their phones? Do they have that look of horror on their face, like I understood 4 of the last 18 words you just said? And you have to be responsive to that in real time. Next, constant opportunities for practice. The more that I teach, the less I talk. I talk a little bit, and then I say, okay, now go put your hands on the keyboard. Because what I quickly remembered from when I learned to program was that I learned very little from someone talking at me, but I learned a lot from getting my hands on the keyboard and making mistakes. So when you teach, say some stuff, and then give space for practice. The third one was the hardest thing in the world, and that is allow the people that you're teaching to fail. If you're a senior developer and you have a junior pair that you're supposed to be mentoring and coaching, great. Let them mess up. It is so hard to sit on your hands when you know the answer and you want to go, no, you just got it, the semicolon, if you could just, but don't. Sit back and go, I don't know, what do you think? The first 6 months of my career, I paired with a super senior Java developer every single day, and he would do that all the time. And it drove me insane, because I knew he knew, right? Like, he would look at my code and go, oh yeah, I should do that thing again. But he would never say that. He had this incredible patience and this incredible grace of knowing that if he let me get to the answer myself, that would be far more valuable than him just going, oh no, you just do that thing. So, make room for people to fail. Teaching has a lot of benefits, and you can teach in a lot of contexts. I'm lucky in that I have a whole apprenticeship program, and I get to teach for about 6 months out of a given year. But you can teach at conferences, you can teach workshops, you can lead user groups, you can give a lunch and learn at your company. There are all kinds of ways to build teaching into your career. We talked about deeper knowledge. You can learn to build rapport with a room. That's really important because a lot of us as developers, especially as we go up the levels and kind of move into leadership and tech lead roles, we're going to have to talk to rooms full of people. We're going to have to sell the value of our work. We're going to have to explain why the thing we did makes a lot more sense than the thing they asked for. Very often we're going to have to explain to non-technical audiences. So it's really good to teach because you learn to break down complex concepts into 6th grade words. And you learn to do that feedback thing where you look at a room and you go, okay, they got it, they didn't, they did. I'm going to say it this way and see if that makes it better. You build your communication skills. One of the toughest lessons that we learned was that the best developers we had did not make the best teachers. It was tough for them too. They know so much. Software development involves so much contextual knowledge. Think about the work that you do, and then think about all the other things that you know about that enable the work that you do. I'm an iOS developer. I know how Xcode works, kind of. I hate it. But yeah, but I know about Xcode. I know that Xcode does some really stupid, inexplicable things that I would not know if I didn't use it every day. I know version control. I know how to use Git. I know how to use our build tools. I know how to use our test frameworks. I know what a test framework is. I know what a framework is. See what I'm saying? Contextual knowledge. We have so much terminology. We have so much additional stuff beyond just the code that we write. And so taking super senior developers and putting them in front of new people, they spoke their own language. They spoke developer speak. And the new little developers went, I'm sorry, what? Could you, oh God, I'm an idiot. I should totally understand this. I see this a lot with developers speaking to non-technical audiences as well. Every project that I've ever been on has had a product owner that was not a technical person. They were a manager, or they were marketing, or they were some other area. And so giving them a demo could not be us up here talking developer words. We had to learn how to explain the work that we were doing in understandable terms. So teaching lets you practice that. Teaching helps you learn to give and receive effective feedback. Those are both skills. We're going to talk about them more in a couple slides. And finally, teaching lets you practice public speaking in an environment where, theoretically at least, you are the expert. I used to be terrified to talk to people in rooms like this. Like, I would get up on the stage and immediately lose like 40 IQ points, just out of sheer fear. And then I spent a lot of time talking to junior developers, which had the marvelous impact of teaching me that I actually know more than I think. And then I started coaching more experienced developers. And then I started coming to conferences and hopefully saying things that are valuable to people that have more experience than I do. So teaching is a great way, if you are, like most people, afraid of public speaking, to get started. All right, number 4. If you're here, you've already got a great start on this. We are so lucky with the community that we have in software development. There are so many opportunities to learn and to be supported and to grow in both a professional and a personal context. So, I'm from the US. We have meetup groups galore, user groups, local stuff, conferences, all over the place. So easy to find. Like, you go on the internet and you're like, Detroit Python, and there's like 5 different groups that talk about that, which is fantastic. So look and see what you've got close to you. If you are from a tiny little rural town and there's not much of a tech community, you can still access the community. There are tons of Slack groups. I'm a member of more Slacks than I want to admit. I might need an intervention. Twitter is great for making contacts, for reinforcing contacts. You meet somebody at a conference, talk to them on Twitter after that. If they live on the other side of the world, you're still in contact. And I say this in the context of career building because professional contacts are like gold. They can mentor you, they can commiserate with you, they can conspire with you to build really cool stuff, they can inspire you, they can support you, and, of course, they can help you find your next role. I have never gotten a job by sending somebody a resume, ever. I have gotten phenomenal jobs because I knew somebody. And not in the kind of, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back kind of way, but in the way that someone you know understands that there's more to you than your resume. I got my first developer job with a couple of programming classes, about a year of self-teaching, and a sparkling personality, and that was literally it. I went to the tech interview, and the only thing that I didn't do was cry. But I met the guy who interviewed me at a meetup group for a meetup that I had started. And down here I say, if you don't have a community, create one. Something I noticed in Detroit was that every technical event that I went to was full of men. And men are fantastic. I like them a lot. But I never met other women developers, and that was kind of a bummer. So I found this organization called Girl Develop It, which was founded in New York in 2010, and said, hey, can I start a chapter in Detroit? And they were like, we don't know if anybody's going to be interested. And I was like, I don't know if anybody's going to be interested either, but I'd like to give it a shot. So a friend and I started this chapter of Girl Develop It in Detroit. We thought nobody was going to show up to our first meeting, and 75 people did. It has now been 4 years, and Girl Develop It Detroit has 3,000 members, has taught 1,000 women to code, and has a thriving and vibrant community that was not there before. So if you don't have a community, you can make one. And I got my first job at that first event. When this technical recruiter said to me, you should come interview for me, and I went, you don't want that, which is not a thing you should say when somebody says they want to interview you, just for the record. And he said, oh, well, why do you say that? I said, I don't know anything. I've taken some classes. I really wanted to get into this field. I'm so excited about it. I want to learn, but I don't know enough yet. I can't do this for money. And he said, yeah, okay, so you said all those things, which are all the right things, and you're here and you started this thing. And that's huge for me. Starting that group has been one of the most valuable professional moves that I ever made. Because I would go to conferences in Detroit and people would go, oh yeah, you're the girl who did the thing. Which was way better than just being, oh yeah, you're a girl. So that was my first job. And every other one that I got came out of a relationship as well. When I say relationships, I don't mean, I hate the term networking, and I also hate networking. When I go to events, I talk to everybody that I can. Because that's great, and it's good practice to talk to people. But when I form relationships, I think about quality over quantity. Because you can only manage so many relationships, and you should focus on the ones that are going to be really valuable to you. I also focus on what I can do for another person versus what they can do for me. Because if I focus on what I can do for them, whatever they can do for me will usually show up at some point down the road. So begin those relationships as a giver. Number 5, know the business. Raise your hand if you are writing code to make money. Yeah, all of us, right? So either we're doing it to make money for ourselves in our own business or for somebody else in their business. Raise your hand if it's for somebody else in their business. Yeah, most of us. Okay, so if you are working for a client, learn everything you can about their business, about their model, about their goals, their vision, their strategy, about what they are trying to accomplish. If you're at a product company working on a product, know everything about that product. Talk to the designers, to the product manager, to the owner. Learn about the vision and the goals and the challenges. I say this because I had an apprentice who had just graduated from the program, so she had a solid 3 months of software development experience. And this is on a team that was otherwise very, very, very senior. And we had put her with a client, and then another client said, oh, hey, I need iOS devs, and I'm fine with juniors. And so we said, oh, okay, well, the team she's on is pretty big, so we're going to pull her and put her on this other team. And we did, and the next day when she wasn't in stand-up, the client went, where is so-and-so? And we said, oh, well, she's been moved to another client. And they went, no, we like her. Bring her back. This is somebody with literally 3 months. She could write a for loop, and that was about it, right? And we all kind of went, oh, okay. So we did. We got her back. We said to the client, why is this person valuable to you? We think she's great, but why do you? And they said, she talks to us in a way that makes sense. We trust her. When she says things, we believe her. This was the least experienced person on that team by a solid 4 years, which in development is a 10-year Hollywood marriage, right? But to the client, she was one of the most valuable, if not the most valuable people, because the skill that she had cultivated, which was to understand what they were trying to do and to understand how they wanted to communicate and to tell them things they wanted to know in a way that they understood, that built trust. She was in that team for 2 years. And she was ready to go learn something new, and we still had to really fight them to get them to let her go. So, even if you are not the most experienced person on the team, you can still be the most valuable. Next up. As developers, we kind of grow every day. We don't really have a choice. We're always doing something new. My favorite part of my job is that I go in and I have a problem in front of me that I don't immediately know how to solve. And so I get to go through that process of figuring out how to solve it. So we do grow every day, we have to. But growth work goes beyond that. Growth work means intentional growth, above and beyond kind of what you learn in the day-to-day. And this could be things like setting some professional goals and working toward them. It could be intentionally building new skills. If you're a JavaScript developer, maybe it's you learn the new framework du jour, or you learn a new build tool. If you're an iOS developer, maybe it's you learn how to fix that thing in Xcode that nobody else knows how to solve except by shutting the whole thing down and reinstalling it. If you know that, by the way, let me know. It can be asking other people for feedback and saying, hey, I'm trying to grow. I'm trying to improve. I'm trying to figure out where I'm strong and where I'm weak, and I would love to know how you perceive me. And then taking that feedback and using it to actively work and overcome your weaknesses. Somebody said to me recently, I think of you as a leader in the company, but I notice that you tend to be kind of quiet when we're having contentious discussions that I think your voice would be valuable in. And I went, well, yeah, I hate conflict. Sometimes I'm not even at those contentious discussions. I hate it that much. But it was valuable feedback, and it made me go, oh, okay, that's something I can work on. And lastly, you can work with a mentor or professional coach. I did this for the first time this past year, and it has been one of the most valuable career experiences that I've ever had. And the coach that I work with is not a developer. She is not technical at all. And I went into the experience going, I'm not really sure that I can learn a lot. And after my first session, had my head blown off with how much I had learned. So I highly recommend that as well. You can get a long way through reflection, especially if you're pretty self-aware to begin with. But a huge part of your success in your career is about understanding how other people perceive you and working to shift that perception if you have to. Which leads me to feedback. Feedback is actually the other thing that I'm giving talks about this year. And I'm giving talks about it because I've historically been very bad at it, both giving and receiving, and I've worked very hard to be better. My company has also been historically very bad at feedback, and we have worked very hard to be better. Because feedback is one of the best tools you have for making performance better. Positive feedback is great. It feels good, it's motivational, it builds relationships, it helps you look at your strengths, because you may not know you have them, and build them up. Constructive feedback, which is what I say instead of negative feedback, helps you figure out where you can be better. When you seek feedback, I encourage you to do so from a mix of colleagues. It's really tempting to just get feedback kind of from your inner circle, but those people are just going to tell you how great you are. And that's nice to hear, but it's not the most valuable thing you can ask for. So ask some of those people. Ask them not to be too nice to you. Ask some supervisors. And ask a broader collection. I try to get what we call 360 feedback about once a year from our team. And these days, even though it scares me a little every time, I ask people in the company that I know are not my biggest fans. They are great colleagues, we work well together, but they're not personally in love with me and my work in a way that would blind them to the things that I have to get better at. And the feedback that I get from them is the most valuable that I get, because they're seeing things from a perspective that I don't have and the people closest to me don't have. Giving and receiving feedback are both incredibly valuable skills, and they are both incredibly hard skills that most of us don't get a lot of practice with. Raise your hand if you think that your workplace makes excellent use of feedback as a performance improvement tool. Oh boy, that's less than usual. All right. You're also in good company, because most workplace cultures don't do that because it's hard. It's really hard. But your ability to give honest and thoughtful feedback, whether it's positive or negative, shows your colleagues in your company that you're invested. You care about their success. That builds a lot of positive things. Your ability to receive feedback graciously and act upon it if you need to also engenders respect and builds trust with the people around you. Like I said, this is a whole talk all by itself, but in the interest of time, I'm going to give you the really short version. Here are my 5 fastest ways to improve your feedback skills. Number 1, if somebody gives you positive feedback, they go, "You killed it in that meeting," or "I really love that thing that you did with your code. I don't totally understand it, so explain it to me later, but I think this is awesome." Don't do that thing where you go, "Oh, it's not, that was so dumb. Oh my God, I said that stupid thing." Don't do that. Look them in the eye and say, "Thank you." Harder than you think. This one's even harder. Accept constructive feedback without saying anything. Don't argue, don't push back, don't have a lot of feelings at the person giving you feedback. Pause, breathe, grit your teeth if you have to, and say, "Thank you for the feedback." And then go home. Cry about it if you have to. I have to sometimes. Sit with it. Wait till the feelings simmer down a little bit, because they will. Emotions come and they go. When you are no longer emotional about that constructive feedback, then decide if and how to act. When you give feedback, be specific. You did a good job is not helpful to anybody. Tell them how. You did a bad job is equally unhelpful to anybody. Tell them how. Be thoughtful. Say it in a way that will help it land gently. For example, "I know you probably did not mean this because I think you are a good person. But when you said that thing in the meeting, it made you sound like a jerk." And be direct. This is the hardest one for me. I'm not somebody who likes to say, "You messed up really badly." It's so hard for me to just say that and then stop there. But sometimes that's the most important thing you can do. And before you give unsolicited feedback, ask. It starts you off on a good note. You may say to somebody, "Hey, I have some feedback that I would like to give you. Are you open to it?" And that will start off the conversation far, 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 far better than if you say, "Hey, you really messed up this thing, and this thing, and also I've been meaning to tell you for a while that other thing," and da-da-da-da. Prepare someone and let them decide if they want the feedback right then or not. And finally, always assume positive intent. When you're giving feedback to somebody who's messed up, assume they meant well. And if you are receiving feedback that's hard to hear, assume that person is giving it to you for your growth. They are probably not giving you constructive feedback because they hate you and think that you suck. They're probably giving you that feedback because they think that you're great and you could be better. Number 8, have an escape hatch. Have a way out. I have what I call a forget you fund. And I have that because if you want your career to grow, you have to be able to get out of situations that suck. If you're in a work environment that is toxic, that is hurting you, or is just not letting you grow, you need a way out. So that might be having a forget you fund so that you can just quit. But a better way to handle that, a broader way, is to build career security. This is different from job security. Job security means you get to keep the job that you have. Career security means that if you lose the job you have tomorrow, you can get another one and not have it be too hard. You can do that by building a network, by having those relationships. You can do it by keeping your skills current through that learn-to-learn thing we just talked about. And you can do it by making your work visible and searchable. For most of us, that means GitHub or some other way that our code is on the internet. But it can also mean blog posts. It can also mean conference talks. It can mean all kinds of things. Put your value out in the world so people can see it. You should always have a plan B. And if you're a control freak, a C and a D. Even if you love your job, you should still be able to picture the future in case things go south tomorrow. I love my company. Really, really love it. Not just how people say, "Oh, I love my company," but I really love it. It's part of my family and a huge part of my life, and I adore it, and I adore the work that I do. But if everything imploded tomorrow, I know who my first 3 phone calls would be. This is a big one. You can have the best career in the world, the best job in the world, the best everything. You can have a great community, you can have great, fulfilling professional relationships, and none of it matters if you stress yourself sick, if you are overwhelmed with anxiety, if you are in too much pain to get out of bed in the morning, if you're struggling with depression. You have to care for yourself, and that means your body. It means your mind, and it means your heart. We have this weird career. It can be incredibly rewarding. It can also be incredibly stressful. Working under deadlines is hard. If you are one of those people who has to be on call as a software developer, A, I'm sorry, and B, that is stressful. It's also not a job where we get to move around a lot unless we think about it. My company does have a treadmill that you can work on, but I never see anybody doing it. Like, we get in a mode, and we suddenly have been sitting at our desk for 8 hours a day. We also have this really cool ability to do our work anywhere in the world. Sounds great, right? Eh? No, it's not. It is, but only used judiciously. Because that ability to work from anywhere can turn poison really, really fast. It can turn into work always. I say this is so important because even if you do everything else right, poor health can take it all away, and it can take it all away really, really fast. So, I am not going to lecture you about diet and exercise. I love cheeseburgers. And last night, I binge-watched 30 Rock for like 8 hours, and I justified it because I ran a half marathon 3 months ago. So again, no lectures. But I will encourage you to find a lifestyle that works for you and that makes you feel capable of doing the things that you want to do in life. Similarly, I will not lecture you about working too many hours, because that would be hypocritical. My work is really important to me, and I invest a lot of time and energy in it. But I would encourage you to set boundaries. Ensure that work doesn't get in the way of everything else that you want in life. I don't really believe in hard and fast rules for work-life balance, but I believe in listening to yourself and being kind to yourself and caring for yourself in such a way that you can learn and grow and experience joy and fulfill your responsibilities to the people around you. I'm going to skip through this really fast because I'm running close to out of time here. That's why it's in a slide for you to take home with you. I built this little self-care inventory, and this is something else that I use in coaching that I use for myself. And it's a series of questions about physical health, about emotional health, and how work factors into both of those things. All right, my last strategy. If you are not familiar with Dharma comics, I highly encourage you to check them out. They are written by an original Facebooker who helped build the like button. She now does comics for a living. I don't know what this is about software development. But this is phenomenal. It's one of my favorites. So you got this little guy, and he's like, oh God, the dragon's going to eat me. And then he goes, how about I give the dragon a hug, which is pretty much how I go through life. And check it out. Gets to ride a dragon. So my advice to you is to love your dragons. And when I say dragons, I mean fears. Because your fears are the biggest clue for how you can be awesome. They're your opportunities. They're the places that you could grow in a way that will change your life. We tend to use fears as a cop-out. Oh, well, I'm just scared of public speaking. I'll never be good at it. So, I'm never going to be somebody who could teach other people. I'm never going to be somebody who could speak at conferences. It's just who I am. Untrue. Fears are not an irrevocable part of who we are. They can be changed. They can be grown through. When I was a junior developer, I was terrified to say I don't know. Because like most junior developers, I was convinced that everybody else knew more than me, I did not know enough, and I was probably going to get fired tomorrow. Fear of saying I don't know somehow led me to become a teacher. And I had to face that fear square in the face, because the first time I ever gave a lecture about introductory JavaScript, I said I don't know 14 times, because even total beginners can ask questions that you're just like, where did you come up with that? And the first time I did it, I felt the ground fall out from underneath me a little bit, but I said it anyway. And everybody went, oh, okay. And I went, wait, what? And then I learned to say, I don't know, but because I'm a developer, let's Google it. Let's figure it out together. Let's find a way through. And suddenly, I don't know stopped being scary. I stopped being afraid to not know things, because we all don't know things, especially in a field as broad, varied, and crazy and changing as ours. There's always going to be stuff we don't know. Because of my career as a developer, I am no longer scared of not knowing things, which is a pretty huge thing. More recently, I was scared of two things. I was scared of public speaking, and I was scared of flying. And now I speak at conferences internationally. If you had told me a year or two ago that I was going to do that, I would have laughed at you and then run out of the room crying, probably. The first time I ever gave a tech talk, I did 3 shots of tequila beforehand, and the video is still on YouTube. And I didn't get on stage for another 2 years after that because it was so embarrassing and I was so horrified by the whole thing. And I thought, I'm just not a good speaker. I'm just too scared. I'll never be good. And then about a year and a half ago, I went to a conference, and I was so inspired by a talk, and I thought, man, I have something to say that I think I can say without tequila. No tequila today, by the way. And so I applied to a conference, and I got in. And it was in Kentucky, so I could drive there. And I worked through that first fear a little bit. And then a little more. And then I got into a conference in Norway. I mentioned I'm from Detroit, right? Also fear of flying, like severe fear of flying. But I thought, when am I going to get to go to Oslo again and speak to a Norwegian audience of all things in the world? So thank you, NDC. I flew internationally for the first time in 25 years, and for the first time ever without whatever it was that my mom gave me as a child to keep me calm. And now I get to fly all over the world and all over my country, and I get to speak, and I get to do these incredible conferences, and it is amazing, and it has changed my life and let me meet people and let me grow in ways that I never would have if I had just stuck with, I am scared of speaking and I am scared of planes. You should just be on the ground. There is no reason to be on a metal tube hurtling through the air at whatever miles. Just no. It's still there a little bit. But I share those stories because I know that fears can be grown through. So here's my fear inventory. Ask yourself, what are you afraid of? What is the underlying fear? Because I'm not just afraid to say, I don't know, I'm afraid to look stupid. What steps could I take to overcome that fear? They can be small steps. And then what could you gain? And that last question, imagine a little bit, dream a little bit. If you work through the fear, what actually happens might be even bigger than what you imagine. Those are my strategies. I always talk more than I plan to. This is the first time I've given this talk. So thank you so much for being here for the debut of it. Can I answer any questions? Good. Oh, man. I'm just kidding. Go ahead. Okay, the question was, where do you find a professional coach? A good one, which is a good, a good qualifier. My coach was actually the coach of my boss. So there were a couple of benefits to that. I could talk to somebody who'd worked with her and knew that she was fantastic. She knew the weird flat structure of my company pretty well already because she had worked with somebody that already worked there. And that was really helpful to me. So ask your colleagues if they know somebody. Otherwise, the great white internet is available to you. But if you can get a recommendation from someone, highly suggest that. Even like tweeting out and saying, hey, I'm looking for a coach, in this area. Does anybody know anybody could be valuable? Other questions? Yes.
Do you get any time at work to do like reading up on stuff or reading blogs and things like that?
Yeah.
Like after a normal week of work,
Yeah.
you do end up reading in the evening and stuff, but it's exhausting after a couple of weeks of doing that.
Sure. The question was, do I get any time at work to do reading and this growth work and learning, that kind of thing? I do. I am very lucky. Our company has what we call Friday Hack Days, and Hack Days are for you to get better at whatever it is that you want to get better at. For some of us, that is learning a new programming language. For some of us, it's a new framework. For some of us, it's crying over Xcode for an extra 8 hours a week. And for some of us, it's reading and blog posts and working with coaches and growing in other ways. So we do have that. A whole day is a lot. That's been part of our company since the beginning. If it's not part of your company, that's normal, right? That's not a usual thing that we get. But it may be worth seeing if you can get your company to build in 2 hours a week, half a day a week, something like that. Because We go home and we have lives and we have families and we have jobs and pets and cars and houses and all these things, right? So if you can get that growth built into work, that's incredibly valuable. Good question. Yeah?
Yeah. So, you have a flat company structure.
Yes.
Who gives you a pay raise?
Question was, you have a flat company structure. Who gives you a pay raise? So we actually have 4 co-founders of our company, and one of them is the people co-founder. And he meets with everybody at least once a year, but also if you have made a sudden big stride in your career. So I had gotten a raise as a developer, and then I got moved over to running our apprenticeship program, where theoretically I'm producing 10 to 20 new developers for the company a year. So that's a big career change. So I also got evaluated for a raise at that point. So that's our system. Definitely once a year, and then if you have some big thing happen. Any other questions? All right. Fantastic. I will be up here for a few minutes afterward, but I want to clear the stage for the next speaker. So, this is me, and that's my dog. Find me on Twitter. Please email me. I would love to hear your questions. I'd love to learn about your career path. I would love feedback. I will say thank you for the feedback, and I will smile at you. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that come up after the talk. So, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, NDC London, for having me, and enjoy the rest of the conference.